Surrender is a gift that you can give yourself. It's an act of faith. It's saying that even though I can't see where this river is flowing, I trust it will take me in the right direction. Author Debbie Ford explains surrender so perfectly.
You know, sometimes life can feel overwhelming when the weight of each decision and action is on us. However, when we stop and realize that in fact, there is a greater power, the doer, the force behind it all, we can slowly feel that weight being lifted.
That reminds me of something. Did you ever do trust exercises in school when you let go and fell back so that someone caught you? Or walk around blindfolded and just follow the directions of a classmate? You had to fully trust that the one giving you directions would keep you safe.
I do remember that. At the time, it felt exhilarating. And once we gained that trust, it gave a sense of comfort. In the same way, once we receive this God knowledge, we learn the one behind every action. Thus, it becomes that much easier to connect and remember this Nirankar.
Connection leads into a state of surrender, or samarpan. I am limited by my human form, and I can walk on the path laid before me. However, the key is to always accept that Nirankar's will is perfect.
Perfect it is. Accepting the will of God will get us to the point where both the ups and downs of life do not affect us. No matter the circumstance, we take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Whatever comes, let it come. Whatever stays, let it stay. Whatever goes, let go. Soul Vibes. Welcome to another episode of Soul Vibes. My name is Samdish and I'm joined by Shobhataji.
Sant Nirankari. We are grateful for this opportunity to explore the topic of surrender, what it is, how to achieve it, and what value it brings into our lives.
You know, Shobhataji, it is said that spiritual surrender is about giving up our attachment to specific beliefs and preconceived notions that are created through our day-to-day life. Baba Hardev Singh Ji was one who lived his entire life in a state of surrenderance.
And what a life he lived. Babaji was the epitome of love. From the very beginning, Baba Hardev Singh Ji dedicated his life to the mission, whether it be driving Baba Gurbachan Singh Ji's car, or taking photographs during Samagams and being Sevadal in charge, to embarking on a 36-year journey of promoting human values and universal brotherhood as Satguru.
I am so happy that Baba Hardev Singh Ji has given us all these opportunities to attain this state from the various initiatives he has provided for the mission, from blood donation clinics to tree plantation drives to adopting the road. All these volunteer initiatives, they help us take a step back and detach from the material and do something that helps the greater good, one step closer to attaining a state of surrender.
That feeling when we volunteer, Samdishji, it's indescribable. A higher purpose, a sense of bliss, and a reminder that we are all part of one entity that is connected by the common thread of Nirankar. Speaking of community, let us check in with saints all across Canada and see how they are utilizing the countless tools our gurus have given us to deal with the current times and remain in a state of surrender.
Let's start with the mind. I'd like to introduce Jasmine G from Edmonton, who's currently completing her bachelor's in psychology. She'll give us insight on the psychology behind spiritual surrender.
Thank you, Samdish-ji, Sant Nirankari. As I'm still studying the roots of psychology and how it contributes in our daily lives, it is to be clearly put that the power of mind is broadly dependent on our thoughts. How we think and what we think shapes and molds the personality of ours. For instance, me and my friend would be sharing the exact same experience, but the way we both interpret what happens could be totally different. I remember when I used to visit people from different backgrounds and mindsets to help them out to understand the importance of self-acknowledgement, there was one thing which truly fascinated me. That the ones who believed that they are worthy and sampuran, that is entirely divine, were the ones who had speedy recovery. Even over the time, many researches have been made to support the fact that people who believed and surrendered themselves to the holy power, outshined in treatments for anxiety, depression, and many mental and physical problems. Man beche Satgur ke paas, tis sevak ke karaj ras. Mind is just a part of the body, but this whole body is the part of Nirankar. Either run your body according to Satguru or let the mind run you. Because mind will only operate on calculations and logics and is very limited. But the actual power is what I feel is not dependent on mind, despite it lies heavily on our choices. The clarity of choices is what we can attain through surrendering ourselves in totality to the ultimate power which is limitless. Samdesh, during this pandemic, I was totally devastated by watching and hearing people dying and going through some terrible times. It is then that I recalled a memory from my school time. During preparations for my board exams, my English teacher used to tell me ways to learn quickly and excel in my grades. At that time, I had full faith in her that whatever she is teaching me is better than anything else. I feel that belief and surrender to my teacher resulted in wonders. Similarly, in this robust life, to maintain constancy between divinity and materialistic world, it is truly important to surrender to the present Satguru, as only through Satguru it is possible to attain salvation. The teachings of Satguru Mata Sudikhsha ji had always a prime focus on remaining positive in every situation. She said, if we will see every person as our own image on the mirror, then only we will do justice to the equality in every person. So let's become walking mirrors to each other.
During a time when there is so much change, Jasmine ji has beautifully reminded us to stay in a state of positivity and not let the negativity around the road affect us. We can do this by watching our thoughts and thinking twice before making a decision. So Shobhita ji, you have been working in the emergency room during COVID. How have you remained in a state of positivity during such a time?
When COVID first began, I felt overwhelmed with fear and anxiety, so much so that it was crippling. I would come home from work in tears, torturing myself in anticipation of what is to come. And my loved ones, they kept reminding me that I cannot lose sight of the truth and the God knowledge during this time especially. So I turned towards listening to Mataji's Vichars, Voice Divine, News Divine, Geets, and reading the English translated Bhagavad Gita.
Even Mataji has said that we don't understand the situation right now, and we may feel negative when Nirankar knows what is happening. The anchor is in the hands of Nirankar. Once we surrender to the formless, we let go of the stress and anxiety, it will help bring a sense of calmness.
Let's now connect with Prabhalji from Calgary. Prabhalji is a university student, and he's joining us today to shed some light on how to achieve a state of surrender in this phase of life.
Thank you, Shobhita ji.
Prabhalji, how has COVID brought challenges into your life, and how were you able to adapt with the tools the Guru has given us?
When transitioning to online school, I saw a big struggle in keeping myself accountable and on track because I was missing out on the real physical experience of being a university student. It was also saddening that I wasn't able to see the saints I got to see in our congregation. But since we're in a time right now where we can truly work on the core of our habits, to try to change my habit for school, instead of forcing myself to keep up, I attempted to pick up a consistent habit that would help me be more accountable. This simple habit was reading just 5 pages of a book every day. And after seeing changes, I was able to see myself in a different light, and also being a student of this mission, to still improve at times like this, surrounding myself with spiritual reminders helped me still feel connected despite the challenges. Rather seeing it as just adapting, treating it as an opportunity to improve the center of who I was, helped me see it in a different perspective.
I actually really like that. So sometimes I feel like when we have a really big task to do, it's hard to get through it. But when we make these small changes, then it's easier to, work up to that bigger change. That's really good, Prabhuji. Can you maybe share an experience from your life that proved to you that success lies in spiritual surrender?
Of course. This experience I had was during the youth conference in Calgary. During the early stages, the idea of creating a float for the world-famous Calgary Stampede Parade was sparked. The team decided to go with the replica of the Fountain of Oneness from the Nirankari Sarovar in Delhi. And while it was still a concept with only rough drawings, the team submitted the application. And sometime in March, the float was actually rejected by the city panel. Then we came to know that a saint from the UK had actually met Huzur, where Huzur himself is speaking of the youth conference, the parade, and the float. And the team remembers thinking that, how is it possible that the float was rejected, but Huzur himself is speaking of the float? But we knew this wasn't a time to be discouraged, but rather surrender whatever may come. We created an appeal letter despite being told it wouldn't be possible. And eventually, after some time, it was approved. And this was now during mid-April, where we only still have the concept. But we knew that now that we're given the green light, we must trust this Nirankar and work. So then we connected with the exhibition team in India to help build this float. And the pieces were also delivered only a couple days before the event. But still, with that great help, it had been built to such perfection and beauty. We were also told that our contacts were actually left out before the first inspections. But if we were not rejected the first time, we would have nothing to show for first inspection. So it worked out the only way it could have. Everything was planned already by His grace before we even did the work. This specific experience out of many realizations we had during this event, really taught us that surrendering is not being passive. It is first doing, and through firm faith, not being attached to the results, but rather accepting the outcome, knowing that only this higher power can see the bigger picture.
Wow, such a beautiful story from Prabhuji. I remember attending the Calgary conference as a guest, and it was such a transformational and beautiful experience. It sometimes puts things into perspective that you never know how things will go, but eventually they will work as per the will of Nirankar. Let's now listen to a song composed by Ashish Alung ji from Toronto and co-written by Shubhnit Arora ji from Calgary.
It's been a long journey away from home. To how I feel Nirankar in everything. Nirankar where it begins. Life's about the little things in everything. Every path that I take, Nirankar lead the way. I believed from the start, I surrendered my heart, but I still miss you, Babaji, and I still feel you in me. So I'll spread all your words to the ones who've never heard. Speak the truth is all I'll do to the elderly and youth. How can I raise my faith? How can I remove the hate? Heard your voice in my head, Mataji, is what you said. Life's about the little things in everything. Every path that I take, Nirankar lead the way. देव दे एहसाना दी वरदाना दी बलिदाना दी अफसाना दी फरमाना दी याराना दी मुस्काना दी शुरू कित्थों कर
Such a beautiful song. Babaji used to always remind us that we are above all these little things. Thank you, Ashishji, for sharing this song. We will now speak about ways to achieve a state of surrender in the workplace. I'd like to welcome Sunnyji from Winnipeg, who is a general sales manager in a Volkswagen dealership.
Thank you, Samdishji. I look forward to being a part of this.
Thank you for joining us, Sunnyji. What does surrender mean to you?
Babaji had said that the purpose of life is a life of purpose, so we must have purposeful living. Now, when I think of spiritual surrenderance, the first step I know is to know this purpose. Knowing that the purpose of life is to know this God, and then we have to connect with the Almighty through the tools of Seva, Simran, and Satsang. We must always focus on how to be in a state of oneness.
Do you have any examples of how you applied this into the workplace?
You know, Samdishji, what I try to do is I take breaks throughout the day while I'm at the workplace, because it allows myself to not be so entangled in the business all the time. And when I take these breaks, I try to reflect on myself. I also try to focus on this Nirankari and do Simran so that I can remind myself of the connection, because the connection always exists with Nirankari. The thing is that it's important to remember the connection and be aware of this connection. So through these breaks, I'm able to do this.
That's a great example. So how do you get people on the team to be in sync with the spiritual surrenderance that you show?
So when I look at my team, I think it's very important in how we can stay positive. And the way I do that is by serving them. I help them to achieve their goals. I have actions that are focused more on being selfless rather than selfish, being a team player. Because the key to me is to understand that I'm not the doer, but simply an instrument of Nirankari, and that helps me to remain in spiritual surrenderance. The quicker I can remove the I and focus on the team, automatically I learn to surrender this ego.
I feel that oftentimes we deal with uncertainty in life. How do you deal with this, especially during this time when it's enhanced by COVID?
You know, Samdishji, when I think of uncertainty around COVID, I really think of how fear enters our minds. And it's not even at the workplace, but it's in our day-to-day life. Sometimes even I have thoughts of, how am I going to get through this? Or how are things going to get better? And that may be at something at work, or it may be something personally at home. But I know we're all facing this, and it can be scary. But what I try to tell myself is that fear stands for false evidence appearing real. And what we need to truly understand is that everything is false evidence. Because the only thing that's true is this Nirankari. Nirankari is the eternal truth. It's the reality. It's changeless, it's beyond time, and it's always present. And this is what I've learned to surrender to spiritually. And again, if we remember who the true doer is, and we fully surrender to this Nirankari, then we can work through this in oneness, and we can remove the fear or weakness that's instilled in our mind. Samdishji, have you heard of the example of the gymnast walking on a thin wire?
I haven't, but I would love to hear the example.
Yeah, for sure. So the gymnast walks on a thin wire, and it's high above the ground. And the gymnast tries to balance himself, walking from one side to the other. Now, if you think about it, imagine how scary it is if you're walking on that wire and you may fall down. Partly because you may lose your balance. But you know what? In the end of the day, there's a net that's underneath to catch them if they fall. So what I like to think of the net is like Nirankari, knowing that we are the gymnasts in life, getting through things. We try to find that balancing act. But even if we do fall, Nirankari is always there to catch us and get us back up. And as I was saying before, I know things can be scary, and there can be this uncertainty. But if we put our trust in God, know that He holds the master plan, it makes it so much easier to surrender. As they say, we see from beginning to end, but God sees from the end to beginning.
Wow, I love that analogy. And it is definitely comforting knowing Nirankari is there to catch us, even when we fall. Thank you for sharing these words of wisdom, Sunnyji. I'm sure we can all find ways to implement some of the things we talked about, especially in the workplace.
Now let's speak of the values surrender brings into our lives. A change in the state of mind. Serena G from Vancouver is a working mom, juggling the changing times that COVID has brought. Satguru Babaji recited the poem about staying happy in every situation. Zindagi thori hai, har haal mein khush raho.
Thank you, Shobhata ji. Well, this poem, composed of a few lines, has made me realize that if Nirankari is the doer, then who am I to question what he has done? It taught me to be happy with what comes my way. I was now thankful for being blessed to have my kids at home and safe with me during this pandemic, so it didn't matter to me that my role of a mother was switched to a role of a teacher. This gave me a chance to reflect and count my blessings. At least we are given this time to spend together. As they say, life is too short and we should be happy in what we have. Similarly, going to work brought upon many challenges. Things were changing rapidly. I remember one day when I went into work, I was originally scheduled to manage the floor, but instead they asked me to go to the pharmacy department to help them ring in prescriptions because there was not enough staff in that department. Now, this was an environment outside of my expertise, and I was faced with many challenges. It just felt like my mind was in a turmoil. This is when I turned to Simran to calm down my mind. I did Simran for a little while and managed to get through my shift. Later on that evening, I was listening to Satguru Mataji's Vichar, and her Vichar was on Seva. In her Vichar, she said that Seva is not confined to one place or one group of people. It can be performed anywhere, at home or at work. A small gesture, such as giving a colleague a glass of water, is considered Seva. These words changed my way of looking at things. Now, every time I walk into work, I don't think of it as a shift. I think of it as Seva. So it doesn't matter to me anymore if I'm managing the floor or helping an elderly customer with their groceries. I see this as Seva, not as work. This makes me thankful to Ninkar that I still have a job and I can perform the selfless service to humanity. Basically, I am sitting in his boat and he is steering it. Because I know Ninkar is the captain, then there is no room for frustration, irritation, and challenges. Jeevan da rath ine chalona asat keval bana hai. I have accepted that everything will happen as per Ninkar's will, and surrendering to his will gave stability in my life, which led to peace of mind and happiness. I have no worries anymore because I know I'm in his Sharan, and he will walk me through it. These words often come to my mind. I surrender to thee, for it is not me, you are the doer. If I surrender to Ninkar, then I accept everything he does. Jo tu kabul, tera kiya sab kabul. For me, surrenderance is the key for true happiness in this time of uncertainty.
There is a saying that goes, same storm, different boats. COVID has affected every single person on this earth. There was no distinction between wealth, gender, occupation. But not everyone has had the same experience. It has been so enlightening to hear from different saints across Canada to see how they were able to utilize the Guru's teachings to cope.
Jasmine ji gave great insight on the importance of basing our thoughts around Nirankar to help remain in a positive state.
And Prabhuji's experience with university reminded me that when situations become difficult, I can't just wave a white flag and give up. Instead, I have to find different ways to adapt and succeed despite the circumstance. So next time I'm faced with a difficult hurdle in life, instead of just becoming a victim and blaming the times, I will find ways to hold myself accountable to move forward.
That is so true. Accountability is so important, especially during these times of change. Sunnyji gave a great example of how we can remain in a state of surrenderance in the workplace. I definitely find that at times when things get busy at work, my mind tends to waver and forget this Nirankar. Implementing breaks during work for Simran will be something that can help me reconnect and realign to this truth.
So whenever I feel a moment of weakness, I can step aside and do Simran. Serena Ji gave us an incredible piece of advice that Satguru Mata Ji had shared in her Vichar. Seva starts at home. Mataji has expanded our spirituality to such a degree that we are no longer bound by a person, place, or situation. So next time I have that longing to do Seva at the Bhavan, I can cook or clean for my family members and help a colleague with his or her tasks.
We are immensely grateful to Satguru Mataji for providing us this platform to connect with others and provide a source of support during this time. Babaji had beautifully said, when the pond of life is all muddy and rough, hope says no darkness is dark enough.
Thank you all so much for joining us on Soul Vibes. Sant Nirankari.